I'm here with Dr. Asif Mahmood, who is really the spark for having this event. And I'm here with Daniel Balson of Amnesty International. And I'm here with so many members of my staff that I can't mention them all, but Ivan especially has put his efforts into this. Hello, I'm Congressman Brad Sherman. I come from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. Thank you for coming. Pleased to be hosting this event. We expect a number of members to come, including Mike Levine from California, Kwasi Mfume from Maryland, Judy Chu, who is the chair of the organization in Congress that represents Asian and Pacific Islanders, CAPAC, and my friend Eric Swalwell from California. We expect Jim Costa, also from California, to be here. Obviously, the more Californians you have at any event, the greater the amount of wisdom that you will obtain. Just by way of preview of my remarks, Pakistan is important. It's home to well over 200 million people. It is a nuclear state, and a very substantial nuclear state. Mr. Imran Khan, known for his sports acumen, became prime minister. He lost his parliamentary majority. New elections are supposed to be held in Pakistan in October or November of this year. The Supreme Court retains a good degree of independence. It ordered that there be provincial elections in both Punjab and KPK. That ruling has been ignored. It was a more specific ruling as to Punjab. But what's important is that we do see national elections held as scheduled. I've been involved in Pakistan from a whole lot of different angles. I chair the small but Sindh caucus. We have seen over the many years I've been involved in human rights for both Sindhi activists and also Hindu girls who are abducted in Sindh and forced to convert to Islam and marry much older men. We are all concerned, at least all of us in America, about Dr. Afridi. Congress is perhaps more concerned than the State Department. This is an issue that many of my colleagues have spoken out about loudly for well over 10 years. Dr. Afridi, as you'll remember, played a critical role in getting Osama bin Laden. There are those who say that SEAL Team 6 had 23 members. Dr. Afridi was the 24th man. He remains in custody chiefly for helping the United States get Osama bin Laden. It's, I think, important to all Americans that human rights abuse be focused on, even if it means a trade, even if it means a trade with someone where we would say, well, by justice, that person should not be traded. But the greater justice will be obtained if Dr. Afridi is released. While Imran Khan was in power, there were human rights and rule of law issues in Pakistan. Today, he is the leading opposition figure. Many would say that he's likely to prevail in free elections. We'd have to see. But his speeches are banned from the media. He has been arrested on more than one occasion. We are dedicated to the rule of law, timely and fair elections, human rights, democracy, and freedom of speech. By way of additional information about me, I am the former chair of the Asia Subcommittee of the House of Representatives. In that role, we had hearings on Kashmir, where Dr. Mahmood was one of the witnesses. And I am the number 2 ranking Democrat on foreign affairs, having served there for almost 27 years. Pakistan is a friend and partner of the United States. We work closely on regional challenges. We support Pakistan in times of need, particularly the devastating floods that hit Sindh and other parts of Pakistan, where we have contributed nearly $100 million. We, of course, support human rights and a pathway to and democracy and free elections. We don't involve ourselves in the internal governmental affairs. And look, I've occasionally got some coverage in the Pakistani press, and everyone, they try to write about me. Oh, you're with this candidate. Oh, you're with that candidate. I am not a citizen of Pakistan, and frankly do not know who would do the best job of providing a good government for the people of Pakistan. But America is dedicated to the rule of law and democracy. We do often call out, as I will call out now, for Pakistan to protect the right to speak, to organize, to demonstrate peacefully. We want to see a calm and orderly election in Pakistan. And one controversy is that when Imran Khan was first arrested, some of his supporters took to the streets. Some did violent things. The degree to which Imran Khan is responsible for that and what he said, and I will say that as a politician, I have often stood in front of large crowds and say, go fight for our cause, never expecting them to burn down anything. And so far, thank God, as to my supporters, that is true. Maybe my speeches lack sufficient persuasive power, or maybe they understand that when I say fight, I don't mean burn. Pakistan has a long history of its military and intelligence services interfering with democracy and human rights. The last 15 months in Pakistan have been particularly tumultuous. In April of 2022, a parliamentary no-confidence vote that I alluded to earlier brought down the government of Imran Khan. Mr. Khan at that time thought that the U.S. was somehow behind that. I think he has walked back those statements, and in response to my questions at the Foreign Affairs Committee, there has been an unequivocal denial from the State Department by the very person that was identified by Imran Khan, our Assistant Secretary for South Asia. I would also point out that we don't, as Congress, we have not authorized, and we have not funded, and we have not authorized our funds to be used to support one side or the other, or to influence any parliamentary vote in the Parliament of Pakistan. The government of Mr. Sharif that has replaced Imran Khan's government has engaged in mass arrests and media bans. Prosecutors are pursuing numerous legal cases against Mr. Khan. As I pointed out, he's been arrested more than once. I'm particularly alarmed by the high-profile human rights abuses that have occurred, particularly over the last year. The arrests, alleged torture, and even alleged, and I think in some cases proven to the satisfaction of the most respected human rights advocates in the world, perhaps involving sexual abuse of political figures, such as former Prime Minister Khan's Chief of Staff, Shahbaz Gill. And we also saw the unfortunate treatment of journalist Jamil Farouqi. My Urdu pronunciation has never been complimented or certified accurate, and if I butcher a name too much, Asif will chime in and at least make sure that you know which individual I'm talking about, even if you're not pleased with my pronunciation. There are two more prominent individuals who were arrested. We have their pictures here to draw attention. I should point out that after Imran Khan was taken by paramilitary forces on May 9th, there were violent protests by his followers. And then the president of Mr. Khan's party, which party, of course, is the PTI, Mr. Pervez Elahi, was arrested on June 1st. Dozens of top-tier and mid-tier leaders in the PTI have been arrested alongside hundreds of Khan supporters. Civilians who protested on May 9th are being tried in military courts. This is a relentless, on the one hand, there may be some who engaged in violent activities, but there appears to be a relentless campaign to silence and sideline the political opposition. Legal cases against the former prime minister, which are too numerous to count, and bans on the media covering his appearances, I think, go beyond the rule of law and democracy. To be sure, current and former leaders should be held to account for their wrongdoings, but prosecutors must be free of political influence. Amnesty International, who's joining us today, called these developments a disturbing demonstration of targeting critical voices and using the country's media regulatory authority to threaten press freedom. Overbroad use of bans on news and media publications constitute a violation of the right of freedom of expression. I will point out that those who want to silence speech always say, well, we're silencing false speech. We're silencing misleading speech. Well, just about everything any of my opponents has said has been false and misleading, but thank God I do not have the legal capacity to silence them. And those who want to silence speech always say that they're only silencing false and misleading speech. The answer to false and misleading speech is corrective and persuasive speech on the other side. I'm not here to wade into Pakistani politics, but to advocate for freedom of speech, due process, and even-handed application of the rule of law in Pakistan. The violence unleashed by Khan's followers on May 9th was clearly unfortunate and excessive. We all support peaceful protest, but not violent destruction. And it's, as I've said, what's critical is that national elections are held, that they are fair, free, and that the tabulation of those elections is monitored and transparent. The United States, as I say, we do not take sides, and we take sides only on behalf of democracy. Pakistan has had a range of human rights violations beyond abuse of state power on political scores. There are arbitrary killings, forced disappearances, tortures, restrictions on religious freedom. And here I want to point out just how dangerous it is for a country to have a blasphemy law with severe penalties. Now, I don't expect every country to have a U.S. First Amendment approach, which allows you to do everything everywhere. I was particularly stung half a century ago when Nazis paraded under our First Amendment through Skokie, Illinois, a town which at the time had many Holocaust survivors. I'm not saying every country needs to have that full U.S. First Amendment approach, but when you have a blasphemy law, it is an invitation to someone of the majority religion to just find somebody they don't like in the minority religion and say, that person said this about the prophet. How do you prove otherwise? What flames and passions? And if the politics of Pakistan do not allow for a change in the substance of the blasphemy law, there could be a change in the level of proof that is necessary in order to establish a violation. But to say that a private conversation where one person says one thing and that could be dispositive, that is a danger to any politician who has enemies and any member of any minority religion. I want to highlight two individuals who have suffered these abuses. Khadija Shah, a dual U.S. citizen, is one of them, and I call on Pakistani authorities to, at very minimum, transfer her to house arrest so she can be with her family. And, of course, her picture is up here. We also want to feature Imran Reza Khan, a journalist who's been missing for several months. His picture is here. At least his captor should let his family know whether he is alive and where he's located. The Sindhi community has faced particular elements of persecution and the forced conversions of Hindu girls, and as I've mentioned. There is one other issue I want to mention, well, that I have already mentioned, and that is Pakistani Dr. Afridi. We cannot say that we left no man behind as long as Dr. Afridi remains in prison. He risked his life to help us get the worst terrorist in the world. Pakistan and the entire world should rejoice in the death of bin Laden and should honor anyone who helped make that happen. Of course, Dr. Afridi doesn't have an American family to have the demonstrations and to go on TV for him. And we have seen we've seen the United States trade Victor Aboot for, an arms dealer with a lot of blood on his hands for the release of a WNBA player. Dr. Afridi intentionally, knowingly, risked his life to help rid the world of a terrorist responsible for over 3,000 American deaths. We will continue to monitor the situation, take every appropriate action to try to push our government in the right direction with regard to its involvement in Pakistan human rights. And I know that we have, I believe, an office director, assistant office director from the Bureau of South Asia. I don't know if this person can raise their hands. There we go. And hopefully you will take back to the Bureau what you see here and the fact that Congress is so interested, not only myself, but the various colleagues I've mentioned. I've got a few other colleagues that are also supposed to come. You've got to understand this is an incredibly busy day in Congress, and I'm not necessarily able to get as much time of my colleagues in this room as I would like, even though I promised them good food, which you're all should feel free to eat. We want to urge authorities as we go forward to let the citizens hear from the various political leaders and to vote in properly scheduled, accurately tabulated, transparent elections. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, what? And at this point, we have a video for people to see. I want to thank Dr. Asif Mahmood for that video and the other videos. I haven't seen them yet, but I'm impressed by them. We now have a chance to hear from my colleague Mike Levin, who represents Southern Orange County and Northern San Diego County, and more importantly is a member of the bipartisan Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, the commission made up of members of Congress to focus exclusively on human rights.
Well, thank you so much, Brad. I want to just begin by thanking my dear friend Brad Sherman, who's such a respected voice on this matter, but as a senior member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Also want to thank my dear friend Dr. Asif Mahmood. We tried to get Asif here in the halls of Congress to join us, but this will have to do for today. But really, it's important for us all to be here and to continue our process of getting educated. I'm very adamant that American values, human rights, freedom of speech need to be acted upon, that we have to stand by our values, not just in the United States, but around the world. And I was thinking of a quote by Benjamin Franklin: freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved. And I worry a lot about democracy in America, about the example that we're setting for the rest of the world. And I think that we have to continue to strengthen our institutions, strengthen our checks and balances and the transparency and the accountability of our own system. But I also hope that we can serve as a good example for countries like Pakistan and around the world where some challenges are clear. The other quote on human rights that I love is from Nelson Mandela: "To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity." And so I'll continue to be standing by, listening to my friends here in the House of Representatives like Brad, and outside of the House like Dr. Mahmood. But I thank you all so much for being here and for providing this opportunity for us to be educated this afternoon. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. And now let's hear from the now famous Dr. Asif Mahmood.
Good afternoon. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Congressman Sherman, and my friend Mike Levin, Congressmember Mike Levin, our friend from Amnesty, and there'll be many more members of Congress will be here. There'll be many more members of Congress coming from other meetings to join us. I do want to thank many members, staffers who are here today. They are really heart and soul of what is done here in Capitol Hill on foreign policy, and their work is really tremendous. They are the one who set America's vision and America's policy towards the world. And many Pakistani Americans and other people who are here who are concerned about Pakistan. I do want to mention one name. Cassandra is here from National Press Club and been very helpful. And two people over here who have been extremely helpful and instrumental in doing this, Ivan and Katie. They have really worked very hard. When you talk that part of the region, it is not possible to talk individually one country. Whenever human rights issue comes, you always think about Pakistan and India. And unfortunately, on this race of human rights violation and abuse, India beat Pakistan handily. I have been involved in Kashmir for the last 4 years, and things on the ground are not human. I worked very hard with the Punjabi farmers movement, and I was involved at every step, and with a huge struggle we won that war, but that was a huge human rights issue. I know that firsthand because my parents were small farmers in Pakistan. What is happening in Manipur today is disgusting and frustrating and really not acceptable. Young ladies are being marched naked on the roads, and young girls are being raped. I think next hearing or briefing should be happening on Manipur, India, before we can stop the next bigger Manipur. Coming back to today's discussion on human rights and democracy in Pakistan, I want to make a couple of clarifications. Many people who are spreading this word, this is something against Pakistan. We are friends of Pakistan, not foes of Pakistan. We have done a work at multiple levels over the decades to help Pakistan. So anybody who's thinking that good friends are those who pinpoint the issues and problems, and especially when the problem with human rights violation. I have no affiliation with any political party in Pakistan, and I don't advocate for one or the other. But I do speak for all human rights issues everywhere, including Pakistan. On the social media and on other, there has been buzz, especially in Pakistani American community, that I'm taking this vendetta against Pakistan military, and that is completely wrong. It might be surprising to many, but I am here telling you the things which I normally would not talk. In last over a decade, the most instrumental and practical support for me on the human rights work in Pakistan has been Pakistan military. When all the diplomatic efforts were exhausted, when Afghan war ended, it was Pakistan military who helped me to save dozens of families who had a death bounty. We were able to open the border to get those families out, get them emergent visas, and many of those families are in Albania, Germany, or some in the United States now, but their life. And this was done with no precondition, no bargaining, but just as a human right thing. Many times I have reached out to Pakistan military because many different segments of population are abused or harassed or tortured in Pakistan, and they have come across and they really helped me. Today, we are asking them to help their own people. 250 million people whose future is on risk. We believe that Pakistan's future is in democracy. And the best way to respect human rights is democracy. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to organize, and freedom to demonstrate is the basic ingredient of democracy. Media should not be silenced the way it is being done today. Just on one person having about 180 cases on Imran Khan because of political vendetta is not acceptable. When we talk about all these things, we are also going to plead to Imran Khan and his party to confess what has been done in their regime for other people and pledge not to repeat this again if they come into power. Any of these people who I am talking about, who I'm fighting for, I have never met. I have never spoken, I have no relationship, and I don't think so I will ever meet. When I see picture of Imran Riaz's 4 sons who are less than 10-year-old with their 2 elderly parents and a homemaker wife, it makes me cry. Many of us over here have children. For 75 days, those kids don't know where Imran Riaz is. I have been pushing every single day, every single door in Pakistan and here, that we need to at least know where he is. He's alive, dead. If he's alive, what kind of status he is, and how he can see his children. Khadija Shah is not only one US Pakistani American woman, but she is a pride of Pakistan. She's a very successful businesswoman and entrepreneur and doing good things for Pakistan. To humiliate her and harass her and make her walk to identification in that jail clothes and keeping her for 75 days is really a bad name for Pakistan. People who are saying that we are standing here talking about that is not a bad name for Pakistan. What is happening there is a bigger scar for Pakistan. Khadija Shah should be let go home. They can have the case in the court and court can decide whatever, but she should not be kept away from her children, her family, her parents, her friends, and continue doing her work, what she was doing. I just took 2 names. Mr. Sharif was killed almost a year ago now. We don't even know who his killers are. But we know that there was some vendetta why he was killed. Pakistan needs to bring whoever the killer is, how the conspiracy was done. This is important. When we talk about freedom of speech and freedom of expression and right to protest and right to organize, we also want to make sure that does not cross the lines. What happened on May 9th is not acceptable to us, and it should not be acceptable to any sane political worker or any demonstrator. Certain areas were targeted and burned and ransacked. It should not happen again. I don't think this was an organized thing, but I think we need to do every effort to stop and prevent those kind of things. We have powerful people over here. Some will be here, some will be coming, and some will be given the message. But I think Pakistan's future is in right to vote, right to express, free and fair and transparent elections, and those elections in time according to the constitution. And I think Pakistan government should give the exact date and give the pledge that those elections will happen, and nobody will be kept unconstitutionally out of that election. Forced submissions should stop. People's cases should not be withdrawn just because they are leaving one party or they're joining other party. Because world is very small now and everybody is watching. So as a friend of Pakistan, as a sympathizer of Pakistan, I urge Pakistani authorities to act now. Not let Pakistan go into bigger disaster and bigger breakdown. And I will obviously ask my friends over here who have the real power to use their resources to convince Pakistan that their future is in free and fair election, true democracy, and respecting human rights and rule of law. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Should stress, we here are friends of Pakistan. Many of us have lobbied and worked and supported for not only the aid package from the United States, but the recently concluded IMF loan. And I agree with Dr. Mahmood that the way to improve Pakistan's world image is to improve the reality, the degree that Pakistan really obeys the rule of law, freedom, and democracy. That it is a fool's errand to think that Pakistan would have a good image just by telling people not to talk about the problems. That never works. With me here is Kwasi Mfume, man who was here in Congress before I got here, left us to head what is arguably the premier civil rights organization in the United States, the NAACP, and then came back to continue his advocacy for human rights once again in the House of Representatives. Kwasi, let's hear your remarks.
Thank you very much, Brad. I assume it's on. Everybody in the rear can hear me okay? I want to thank Brad Sherman for his leadership on issues such as this, for his stewardship on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and for his friendship. I respect and admire his positions because they are principled positions. And I, when learning about this gathering and learning that Brad was putting it together, instantly said that I wanted to be here. I should tell you that for me, I first paid attention to Pakistan in 1971. I was a college freshman. There were two things that year that caught my attention on the international scene. One was the apartheid system in South Africa, and the other was the civil war going on that ultimately ended up creating Bangladesh. So I've had my eye on both of those over time. I must admit, I worked feverishly on the apartheid system for about 10 or 15 years until we were able to get Mr. Mandela out and then brought him here to the country, and the rest became history. As you know, he became president. But this issue, this whole notion of the civil war and the creation of Bangladesh and the future of Pakistanis is something that really concerns me. I met recently in my office with a gentleman by the name of Anwar Hassan, who brought with him several Pakistanis from across the state of Maryland to meet with me to make sure that I could hear firsthand their pleas and their positions. And it was out of that meeting and learning about this that I wanted to be here today, because I want to associate myself with the remarks of Brad Sherman, who said, I too am a friend of Pakistan. But as Brad said, Pakistan must shine a way to show the world that it is a true, shining, and living democracy. There are a number of things that trouble me when I go through the extensive history, just going back to 1971. But more importantly, the things that concern me right now. The human rights abuses that have not just been alleged, but have been documented. The assassinations, which people are not calling assassinations. People just get killed and die or mysteriously no longer live. The separation of families and children that's continuing to go on sort of unabated because the lens of the world is not necessarily focused on that. The targeting of journalists who want to report to the rest of the world what's going on and who fear for their lives, even though they are journalists, because they know what can and it oftentimes does happen to them. The corruption that we all are aware of, the money over the table and the money under the table, that buys silence and buys fear at the same time. I'm concerned about the denial of religious freedoms, the suppression of one's desire to worship and believe as they want to. And then we are all aware of the other things that just tear our hearts out, the flooding that has just been constant and going on for a long time. The $3 billion from the IMF to help bring about stabilization and the worry as to whether or not those dollars are going to be spent the way they should be spent. But most of all, the seriousness is around the subject of free and fair elections. There has to be a time and a date certain, and then there has to be, in my opinion, oversight. And that oversight should come from the UN. Now, let me tell you a little bit about free and fair elections when they're not free and fair and are not overseen. Some of you will remember the Baby Doc Duvalier reign in Haiti and how there came about a sense to move toward freedom. And these elections were scheduled, they were held, they had a date certain. But the people who wanted to disrupt them found a way on the day, early that day, to take machetes to women and to cut their arms off and to cut their legs off, knowing that that word would spread rapidly through the hillside and through the villages and that people would not come out and vote. And they did not come out and vote. So when I say supervised, I can't tell the UN what to do. I'm not a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I am an observer and a student of history. I just believe that we've got to find a way to make sure that is how they are guaranteed. People will always vote in their best interests if they get a chance to vote. So those are the things that I wanted to mention that concern me. As I said, I've been looking at this since 1971. I probably am almost a student in Pakistani history. But I do want you to know that, like Brad and so many other members of the Congress, I share your concerns, I share your fears, and I share the fears of people on the ground who are not here, who don't have a voice, and who are living under those sort of conditions. So I will yield back. I want to thank Brad Sherman for his leadership, as I said before, on this, and to thank him also for the opportunity to address all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot claim to have been involved in Pakistan since 1971, except by virtue of my grandfather, who in 1948 and 1949 spent a year and a half in Karachi as a technical education consultant for the International Labor Organization, which, as you know, was originally established by the League of Nations and is now part of the UN. We have with us Ted Lieu, who is vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, a leader of our party. Ted?
Thank you, and I want to thank Representative Sherman for convening this hearing, and my colleagues here, Representatives Mifune and Representative Costa and Schiff, and so honored to be sitting next to my friend Asif. I am on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I am a big supporter of democracy and human rights. Pakistan is a critical ally of the United States. At the same time, we have to make sure we respect human rights all over the world, including in Pakistan. I was a supporter of human rights in Kashmir, as well as a supporter of the Punjabi farmers. And we have to make sure that democracy and human rights do not backslide in Pakistan as well. Thank you for coming here. I just want to let you know a little bit about what it's like to be a member of Congress. Every term of 2 years, we're going to vote over 1,000 times. 80 to 90% of those votes, we don't get a single phone call, email, or meeting. I can guarantee you the overall majority of members of Congress don't go around thinking about Pakistan and the top 20 things that they ever think about. So when you come up here and you make your presence known, you make members of Congress and their staffs learn about these issues, get educated on these issues. And so just want to give a great big thank you for what you do. And you have an amazing person here in Asif who also lets the members of Congress know about the important issues. And with that, I will yield back.
I believe next in line is Adam Schiff. I think Jim can stay with us a little longer, I'm hoping. Adam, Jim, do you want to go first? Do you want Adam to go first?
I'll be brief.
Okay. Jim Costa from the Central Valley of California, a leader on human rights issues, and also a man who has visited Pakistan on multiple occasions and serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee.
Thank you very much, our colleague Brad Sherman, for helping organize this effort with Dr. Mahmood, and all of you who are present here today. I think we value your input and your passion to try to ensure that Pakistan gets on a much better track than it has. I share Congressman Mufehmi's description of Pakistan over some 4 decades or so of his experience, 5 decades, and Congressman Ted Lieu's comments. I think you're going to find a concurrent theme here. As was noted, I've been in Peshawar, I've been in Islamabad, I've been in Lahore, I've been up to the Khyber Pass back in 2005. And I will just relate to you a comment on one of the leaders, 2 of the leaders. Actually, they're still involved, so I won't assert the quote to them, but they were in a meeting that I was with Congressman Howard Berman in 2010, meeting with some of the leadership. They said to me and to our group, they says, you need to understand something about Pakistan. Since the end of the British rule and our independence, 2 things are constant. 2 things are constant. We've had democratic elected governments, we've had autocrats, we've had dictators, we've had military, with running the country. But 2 things are constant: corruption and the army. And you need to understand that. It's been a continuing thread through Pakistan's history, sadly. And but with all the challenges that are going on today in Pakistan, we in Congress, to the degree we can get support on a bipartisan basis to try to make the necessary encouragements for the changes that I think we all want to see, it really requires us to stay with this and to ensure that Americans' foreign policy, to the degree that we can have bipartisan support, is felt with this ally that is a country that has nuclear weapons and that plays a critical role in its part of the world. And so it is connected to a larger foreign policy that is challenging, to say the least. But your involvement, your participation for the issues we care about, free and fair elections, democratic governments, protection of human rights, are essential to make the progress that the people of Pakistan deserve and need. And that's why I'm here to listen and to be a part of this effort, because Pakistan's and the Pakistani people, and I have many constituents who I know and who share their concerns with what is taking place today, that have family and friends that are dealing with the distress that has been occurring in Pakistan for years. So I think we need to have a much more coherent diplomatic strategy in place to assert the sort of influence that I think needs to be to try to get the good results that we all seek, the goals that we would like to see for the long-term good relationship between Pakistan and the United States and the people of Pakistan. And I'll close at that note, but thank you very much.
Jim, thank you for those remarks. We'll now hear from Adam Schiff, who served as chair of the Intel Committee, very involved in foreign affairs then and since then. And I'd have to say his service as chair of the Intel Committee made him one of the most loved and hated members of, well, certainly one of the most respected and famous members of Congress.
Thank you, Chairman Sherman. Wonderful to see you. Thank you for the tremendous knowledge and expertise that you bring to this issue and have brought to this issue for many, many years. During my first 10 years in Congress, I served on the Foreign Affairs Committee with Representative Sherman, and his consistent champion of human rights, I think, is unparalleled. Asif, it's wonderful to see you, and thank you for your leadership, both in our home state of California and around the country, and your efforts to bring these issues to our attention. I've had the opportunity to visit Pakistan many times, both as chair of Intel, but also in my prior role as a senior member of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee of Appropriations, to visit Northwest Pakistan to see how earthquake assistance was being utilized and to explore with our colleagues anti-terrorism efforts. And I've seen good times and hard times over the years in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. It's an incredibly important relationship at every level. I've been following very closely the recent developments in Pakistan, and I share my colleagues' deep concern by the erosion of democratic norms and institutions, as well as the shrinking space for freedom of speech and assembly. This includes reports of a crackdown on the freedom of the press, unwarranted detentions, election uncertainty, human rights violations. In this context, the U.S. must continue to stand up for democracy, both at home and abroad. As the founder of the Freedom of the Press Caucus in the House of Representatives, I strongly believe that freedom of speech and the press and expression are critical to the health of a democracy. In May, I introduced a resolution in honor of World Press Freedom Day, and then again expressed my concerns about high levels of media censorship, killings and attacks against journalism and journalists, and repression of free speech in Pakistan and elsewhere. I urge the government of Pakistan to strengthen its commitment to democratic values and the rule of law, and ensure that the Pakistani people can express their views in a peaceful manner, free from harassment, intimidation, and arbitrary detention. I remain deeply concerned, as my colleagues are, with the continued uncertainty with regard to the timing of elections. It will be very important for that date to be confirmed, for elections to be held and done so expeditiously. I join in urging the parties in Pakistan to agree to dates and hold elections in accordance with the country's Supreme Court and Constitution. As you can imagine, we don't advocate for any particular political party in Pakistan, but what we do advocate for is democracy and respect for the rights of the Pakistani people. Pakistan's parliament and courts must work to uphold the rule of law and safeguard the rights of all citizens to express their views and assert their demands in a peaceful manner without fear of harassment, intimidation, or arbitrary detention. I join my colleagues in urging the U.S. Department of State and President Biden to continue to push the Pakistani government, both publicly and privately, to reinstate democratic norms. And I will continue to stand up for democracy both at home and abroad. And I thank you, Mr. Sherman, and I yield back.
Thank you. And there's one thing I'm very proud of my country about. I think I can say honestly that while this candidate for prime minister or that candidate for prime minister may agree with the United States on this or that foreign policy issue, might be easier for our diplomats to deal with, that America stands not for, oh, which possible prime minister is going to help us on this or that issue. We stand for the democratic process. And whoever the Pakistani people select through a fair process, we'll deal with. And if we disagree on this or that issue, we'll have the State Department work a little harder and we'll iron things out. With that, let's take a look at another one of our videos. It's now my pleasure to introduce a friend, Eric Stalwell, who serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. He established himself as a leader of Congress when he first arrived and has just gotten more and more respect since then. And his Bay Area district includes one of the highest concentrations of Pakistani Americans anywhere in the country.
Well, I thank my colleague, Congressman Sherman, for his leadership on this issue. It's a matter of human rights and freedom of speech and press. And it's so important to my constituents, and I thank Dr. Asif Mahmood for convening us here today. I have sent a letter to Pakistan's ambassador to the United States asking for an update on Imran's whereabouts, and my staff and I remain in contact with the embassy, and they know it is a priority for me in my Pakistani American constituency to learn that. And then as we go into the fall, as I understand it, there will be an interim government and there will be elections. Look, we pick no sides in our congressional district. We just pick the side of our shared values with Pakistan, of free speech, human rights, a rule of law, justice, and democracy. And we hope that sustains itself in this upcoming election. So I stand with my colleagues here in wanting to see, as I said, Imran returned home and wanting to see those values carried out in Pakistan's upcoming election. And we'll continue to engage with my community to make sure that's the case.
Thank you. We now have an opportunity to hear from Daniel Balson, who's, we'll hear from that one. Who's the advocacy director for both Europe and Central Asia for Amnesty International.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Daniel Balson, and I direct advocacy programs for Europe and Central Asia at Amnesty International USA. And I'm honored to be here today to speak about human rights in Pakistan. I'd like to begin by thanking Representatives Sherman, Mfume, Levin, Liu, Costa, Schiff, and Swalwell. And thank you as well for your staff for organizing today's briefing. I'll keep my remarks focused on the freedom of expression and the media freedom issues in Pakistan, especially with respect to the violence, legal structures, and media regulations that are designed to silence dissent. The people who will change Pakistan and the ultimate stakeholders in Pakistan are Pakistanis themselves. And restrictions on media freedom and freedom of expression stifle their ability to do exactly that. With respect to violence against journalism and enforced disappearances, since the arrest of former Prime Minister Imran Khan, journalists, bloggers, and media personalities have faced particularly acute risks of violence at the hands of Pakistani authorities. Enforced disappearances are a well-documented and long-standing practice used by the government of Pakistan to suppress dissent and to target their political opponents. And individuals who are subjected to this violation are often at greater risk of other violations, including torture, ill-treatment, and extrajudicial killing. And the government of Pakistan has maintained that it pursues action against perpetrators who have been involved in enforced disappearance. But perpetrators in Pakistan are rarely held to account. In all cases documented by Amnesty, no perpetrator has been held accountable by a court in Pakistan. On 11th of May, 2023, Imran Riaz Khan, a Pakistani YouTuber and television anchor, was detained and arrested by the Sialkot police in the Sialkot International Airport. And well after his detention, officials released a detention order claiming that Imran Riaz was inciting violence. There was no meaningful evidence or basis for underpinning this order. And police have claimed that Imran was released from custody the next day, but his family, as we've seen today in this moving video, has yet to hear from him or learn about his whereabouts. At the time of his detention, Imran Riaz had been seeking to exit the country after receiving harassments and threats owing to his criticism of the current government's policies. International rights monitors have also documented how journalists and activists are targeted with violence by the state and its supporters. In July 2022, journalist Ayaz Amir was violently attacked by unidentified men hours after delivering a speech where he criticized the country's military establishment. And although an investigation was announced, the perpetrators have yet to be identified. And on October 23rd, 2022, Arshad Sharif, a journalist and supporter of Imran Khan, was killed in Kenya. A Pakistani investigative committee referred to the killing as a planned assassination. In June 2023, media producer Zubair Anjum was abducted from his Karachi home. He was returned one day later. What legal protections exist for journalists in Pakistan are broadly insufficient and may themselves be used to silence critics. The Protection of Journalists and Media Professionals Act includes vague formulations that lack legal clarity and are, themselves, used to restrict freedom of expression. In the course of targeting free expression, the government of Pakistan relies on three legal tools most often: the PECA, the Anti-Terrorism Act, and Section 124A of the Penal Code. First passed in 2016 and subsequently amended, the Pakistan Electronic Crimes Act makes online defamation of authorities, including the military and the judiciary, a criminal offense with harsh penalties. This act has been used to silence criticism under the guise of combating fake news, and it allows authorities to police online speech. The Pakistan Anti-Terrorism Act has granted the government sweeping powers to subject journalists and critics to arrest, detention, and to ill treatment. Last month, Pakistani officials charged at least 7 journalists and commentators with offense against the state under the act. And then finally, Section 124A of the Pakistani Penal Code criminalizes sedition and has been used in the past to charge journalists. In March of this year, a court in Lahore found the section unconstitutional. In May, Pakistani and international media began reporting on plans by the Pakistani government to begin trying civilians under the Pakistan Army Act and Official Secrets Act. This decision, which was roundly condemned by international rights monitors, means that civilian demonstrators could potentially face charges in military courts. Pakistani military courts are designed to maintain army discipline and other discipline within the armed forces. They do not constitute independent or impartial venues for civilians. Finally, something needs to be said with respect to media shutdown. Following the arrest of Prime Minister Imran Khan, authorities in Pakistan moved into blanket shutdown mode, imposing bans, restrictions, targeting expression seen as supportive of the former Prime Minister and critical of the government. In May 2023, officials instituted blanket and indefinite bans on mobile internet and curtailed people's ability to access social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Pakistan's Media Regulatory Authority subsequently banned the broadcasting of speeches by ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan and suspended a private news network. This misuse of the government's Media Regulatory Authority represents a long-standing strategy deployed by Pakistani authorities. Successive governments have moved to suspend the broadcast licenses of major television channels after those outlets aired reporting deemed critical of the government. So, just several recommendations for what Congress and the Biden administration can do. First, jointly press the Pakistani authorities to make changes to their country's legislation, specifically to amend the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act of 2016, and in particular sections 31, 3, and 37, and to remove these overly broad powers of monitoring and shutting down websites and retaining data. And then to amend the Protection of Journalists and Media Professionals Act, in particular section 6, to avoid broad and vague formulations that lack clarity and must be used to and may be used to unlawfully restrict the freedom of expression. Second, demand accountability for government officials involved in enforced disappearances and in violence targeting all Pakistanis, including journalists and media figures, and demand information for the whereabouts of Pakistanis who are currently held in enforced disappearance, including Imran Rayaz. And then finally, call on the government of Pakistan to end its repeated censorship of social media networks and domestic print and broadcast outlets. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you again, Congressman Sherman, for having me.
I want to thank you for that report and look forward to getting even the details about those individual code sections. We ought to be focused on
Yeah.
that.
It'd be good if we could get that information.
Yeah.
I'll
And
be
I
in touch with
I
your
hope you'd
staff.
add to the list the blasphemy law, which we've also seen abused. We now have another video. Questions on
We want to give opportunity to people. We don't have time for too many questions, but maybe 3 questions, different segments. Dr. Khalid Mirza from Miami, I'll come to you.
And this event is on the record. It's being videoed. You can use this video for whatever you want.
Pakistani is paying millions of dollars on security forces. Where are those? Why they cannot stop that? Number 2, there should be international inquiry in this incident. Why happened? How happened? Who did it? Thank you.
I'll just comment on how to stop. Our own experiences here on January 6 illustrate that even if you have, and the Capitol Police is thousands of men and women with guns, how to react to violent citizens is very difficult. It's not a matter of do we have enough machine guns, but to defend our position, but exactly what action to take. And so I assume the Pakistani military is a strong military, but how it chose to react to this, there's no good way to react to this.
There's one person who is personally being affected with all this, and I guess according to my knowledge, he cannot go back to Pakistan. And I think if he go back to Pakistan, at the minimum he will be put in jail, if not more. A famous journalist, I happen to know him very well, Moeed Pirzada.
Dr. Asif, thank you so much. First of all, my name is Moeed Pirzada. I'm a known Pakistani television anchor person. I'm a personal colleague to Imran Rayaz, know his family. I have worked very closely with him. I was also a colleague with Arshid Sharif, and I was in touch with Arshid Sharif till the very last days of his murder in Kenya. I was in touch with him on WhatsApp, and he briefed me about all what was happening, how the Pakistani authorities were forcing his repatriation from Dubai back to Pakistan, and then he ran off to Kenya. I'm a US resident also. I had to run off from Pakistan for my safety in the last week of October. I'm here from 1st of November near Washington. In May, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, called me and informed me that they fear and they have reason to believe that the Pakistani authorities are trying to target me within Washington. So they connected me with the police. I had earlier called the Washington police as well. I want to bring in to your notice. FBI is in touch with me. I keep on informing them. They have given me the tips to protect myself, how to drive, how to, all kind of, risks they have highlighted. They have appointed 2 agents to basically provide the surveillance to me, and they've given me different kind of tips. Now, my question is, you said the State Department representative is here. I'm very touched by the fact, and I'm very impressed and grateful to Brad Sherman, the representative. I'm much impressed by your work in the past several months and how you have looked at the situation in Pakistan, how Dr. Asif Mahmood has organized this, for Jim Costa to be here, and so many other congressmen. And thank you so much for this wonderful presentation from Amnesty on very accurate presentation of what's happening, and I would like to work with you and to meet you. My question is, as you pointed out yourself, Brad Sherman, Congressman, that Congress is alive and sensitive to what is happening in Pakistan, we have not seen any proportionate and comparable response from the State Department. I, in fact, informed the State Department when the first time I received the threats here in Washington. I reached out to State Department, and 4 or 5 officers from the State Department interviewed me on a video link, and I informed them everything, and they said they will alert the FBI. Right? But I haven't seen any proportionate comment from State Department spokespersons or from the Secretary of Income on the situation in Pakistan. I'm a great supporter of the U.S. foreign policy in general, but I think that the biggest plank on which the U.S. foreign policy stands, vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, Afghanistan, and Iran, are human rights, freedom of expression, and democracy. And by ignoring what's happening in Pakistan, the United States is actually compromising on its own cardinal principle for which this country stands. And this is what my concern is. Thank you.
Jim, you have anything?
You know, it's frustrating for all of us. We know what's occurring in the country today, and the ability to get the existing governing structure to respond, to commit to holding fair and free elections that will be monitored by an international United Nations type group to monitor, to ascertain their fairness, is lacking right now at this time. We need to get an international response. And that's why your presence here is so important, and that's why Congressman Brad Sherman and Dr. Mahmood and all of you have been a part of this effort. I know it's hard for you, but we've got to continue to figure out a way in which we can get response from not only Pakistan's neighbors, but and some of them do not want to get engaged, clearly. And until we can create an international response that the existing leaders in that are running the country, and I mean the irony, many of them have been involved in previous governments, as we know. And it gets back to my comment earlier about the two constants in Pakistan, corruption and the army. And they're intertwined. And so how you break that, I think, is the challenge we're all wrestling with, and to bring a level of international support to get the existing leaders. I mean, I've had constituents from the Pakistan community in my area that have gone back there to try to have some impact. And like so many of you, I mean, they fear for their lives if they become too involved, too outspoken, because the existing structure wants to control and any opposition of any kind. And so I think that this is something that the subcommittee and my colleague, Congressman Sherman's been on the Foreign Relations Committee longer than I have, but I think we've got to try to figure out how we cobble together a strategy using your support and others to get the attention of those who are running the country at this point in time, to sit down and to have some sort of an agreement to stop the violence, stop the arrests, stop the murders, stop the atrocities and the human rights violations that we all know are occurring on a daily basis.
If I can chime in on that, I know the South Asia Bureau is well represented here, and I know the Assistant Secretary will be briefed on what happens here. Two things the State Department needs to say diplomatically in a way that I will say perhaps undiplomatically. First, the relationship between the United States and Pakistan depends upon fair, free, monitored, transparent elections. And second, any assassination of a journalist on American soil is an attack on America and our sovereignty, and I can't imagine that that would be tolerated. So I'm, of course, concerned with this FBI report, and I can't think of anything that would do more to hurt U.S.-Pakistani relations than for the government to engage in violence again and deadly violence on American soil.
I just want to recognize two people. One is Ozair Yunus. Ozair, you're here. He's on the Pakistan initiative from Atlantic Coastal, a very, very vital role. We actually reached out to him a little late. If we reached out to him in time, he would be speaking here, but obviously they have a legitimate due process to go through. But Ozair, we really appreciate what you're doing on position you are. You are really a true friend of Pakistan, and please continue doing work and give us input if there's anything else we need to do. And one other person which I want to recognize is my very dear friend and Chief of Staff of Senator Cory Booker, Veronica. Thank you so much, Veronica, being here. I know how busy you are. I know you're probably one of the busiest people over here. And we know there is a staff from Senator Padilla, Senator Gillibrand, and Senator Chairman Manetta's office. Thank you, all of you. And can we take one more question? And Mr. Berkey has a question. Mr. Berkey has long been involved in politics. He's from Houston, very well respected in the community, both Pakistani American, South Asian, and American community. Has done tremendous work, and thank you for traveling all this way, and please.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, Congressman Brad Sherman, Representative Acosta. We're very grateful to you for holding this briefing today, inviting us to be part of it, looking at some of the videos and comments from you people who are leaders of this nation. We all understand that we all stand for democracy, and we've laid out many principles of democracy. But at the same time, we've all recognized that the current regime in Pakistan is a fascist regime, is not living by the rules of democracy, and is hurting not only journalists but common people of Pakistan. I have lived here in the U.S. for almost 50 years now, but I have still family in Pakistan. Other than looking out for the interests of the Pakistani people, I'm also very concerned about the Pakistan-U.S. relations and what is best for the United States. Since I live here, I fail to understand how the Biden administration has not been able to see all these atrocities being carried out in that country, and then still giving them kind of tacit approval to continue. And if I may put it this way, giving them a $3 billion gift to continue so that they can rig the next election according to their wishes, which they're already beginning to work on. So what I want to say is I want great relationships between U.S. and Pakistan. And the only way, Congressman, to have that great relationship is for U.S. to have a great relationship with the people of Pakistan. And right now, the people of Pakistan support Imran Khan. And if there was a free and fair election, we'd see him sweep the polls. Thank you.
I think that's why we support democracy around the world, because our alliance is not with whatever potentate controls whatever territory at whatever time. Our alliance is with the people and our friends in every country around the world. We have now, from California, an esteemed member and a man I see at the barbershop often, Lou Correa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that I also, my esteemed colleague from California, is a very kind individual, very understanding. When I got to Washington, he offered me a comb with his name on it and said, "This will bring you luck." I'm Congressman Correa. I represent Central Orange County, and I didn't hear your full comments, but let me say that I sit on Homeland Security Committee. I also sit on Judiciary Committee dealing with issues related to national security, working with our colleagues, with our allies around the world. And on Judiciary, I deal with immigration issues as well. I've been in Congress for 6 years. This is my 7th year. And the one truth that stands out is that the world is a really big place, and that we need to rely on groups like this one to figure out what's going on at different parts of the world and be appraised so that we can be better policymakers. I heard some of your comments, well received. I personally am focused on other nations as well, trying to figure out what's going on. And what you've said about democracy is right on. I think that's one of the challenges we have. Not only your part of the world, it's important to you, but I think most parts of the world right now are looking at a situation where democracy is challenged. I personally believe we have to protect newspaper reporters a whole lot more around the world, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that really are the ones giving us transparency, clarity as to what's going on in certain parts of the world. Just south of the border in Mexico, I believe last year they had 30 newspaper reporters that lost their lives one way or the other. And so you begin to see that there is fear by a lot of people in reporting what is going down, what is going on Main Street. So in short, what I'm trying to say is we need you. We need your help to let us know what's going on so that we can be better policymakers. Thank you.
Lou, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And let me now introduce Judy Chu, who not only serves on the powerful Ways and Means Committee, but is chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus.
So I am so honored to be here with so many Pakistani American friends to discuss the importance of preserving democracy and human rights in Pakistan. And I especially want to thank my longtime friend, Dr. Asif Mahmood, who has done so much to educate me on what is happening in Pakistan. And of course, I really have to thank Congressman Brad Sherman for putting this on, and as well as Jim Costa, who've been such important voices on these issues and have made sure that we know what's going on, those of us who are representatives in Southern California. Well, I truly believe that a strong relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan is beneficial for Americans, for Pakistanis, and for the stability and security of the entire region. But in recent months, the government has cracked down on free speech and protests. Elections have been postponed. The Constitution has been violated, and demonstrators and journalists have been jailed and even killed. These developments are not only incompatible with a free democratic society, but they also pose an incredible danger to the people of Pakistan and the country's stability. That's why it's so crucial that the U.S. does whatever we can to ensure that Pakistan upholds and strengthens a commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Our relationship is based on these fundamental principles. That is why we cannot remain silent, and we cannot ignore the many worrying signs of their degradation. So we need to use whatever diplomatic tools that we have to prevent further erosion of democracy. But doing so requires that the Congress be informed and speak with a united voice, which is why this briefing is so important. So thank you for organizing this event, for bringing this message here to Capitol Hill, and I look forward to working together to protect human rights and democracy in Pakistan.
One thing that will stand out in history about this event is that this is the first congressional event I know of that started on time and is ending on time. I want to thank Judy Chu for joining us. I want to thank Asif Mahmood, who really poured his heart and soul in this event. I want to thank Dan of Amnesty International. I want to thank my daughter Molly for demonstrating that even 14-year-olds can be interested in human rights. And I want to thank the people who brought us this food, which we now get to eat. Thank you very much.
Wow, I just made it on time, didn't I?
Exactly.
For goodness sake.